Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Candace Owens went on that Jubilee 20v1 show, and that's pretty much a little bit more of their usual hosts for that show. I believe the first person they had was Charlie Kirk. They've had Ben Shapiro on there. They've had Destiny on there. So, you know, a bunch of right-wingers. And Candace Owens is the most recent one. They had Sam Cedar on there, who did a pretty good job. They had a vaccine doctor who did a decent job. They tried to mix it up a little bit, and they tried to, you know, create this platform that's based around like balance. And oh yes, we have one very skilled commentator, debater, who goes up against 20 different people. So obviously the cards are stacked against whoever is the single debater. So in a way, if you have a right-wing person on there, the odds are kind of stacked against them, and especially if they're getting people on the show that actually know their shit and can argue well, which I would say for the most part they do. The only thing that makes it a little weird is that they do get a lot of repeat guests, I guess you could say, the people who sit in the chairs. And basically that's how it works. Is it's a big circle of people, 20 people, I guess, who believe one thing, and then there's one person in the middle who believes the contrary opinion to whatever that is, and then they kind of debate one by one in this little format, this timer-based format. And, you know, it's just kind of a form of slop where they just kind of go through things point by point, don't come to any resolution on anything. Sometimes they do these fact checks, but the fact checks are, you know, a little weird, and I think that's where some of the bias becomes very clear, because even though they do kind of balance it between different perspectives to where, you know, if you can stomach listening to a person like Candace Owens or Jordan Peterson or whoever, it's also a good way to hear the counterbalance to their perspectives as well. So it's like, you know, not the worst thing in the world. It's better than just listening to that person's one-sided perspective. But I think the bias does come in, you know, in the post-production side, and obviously, you know, the people who are organizing this thing and the supposed fact-checking that goes into it. So I'll give an example of that later. But just to play a couple clips from this, this is the first time I've ever covered Candace Owens on the show, I think. I might have talked about her before, but I don't think I've ever really focused on her, because she's the worst. I really don't like talking about people that are just like straightforwardly grifters, that just kind of like reek that disingenuousness in the way that Candace Owens does. I've also said that about Tim Pool. There's just some people that for me, it's impossible to take them seriously. So that's why I haven't talked about her before, and I honestly don't think I'm going to talk about her again after this, at least unless I have to, because she really is insufferable. And she's kind of the definition of an empty suit. That's really how she came across to me in this debate thing, where it's like, you know, there just doesn't seem to be a lot behind the eyes in terms of her believing what she says. She just comes off as a very untrustworthy person in everything she says, and on top of that, she doesn't make her points particularly well. So that's what I'm trying to emphasize here. You know, I don't think anybody really needs to listen to Candace Owens too much. If you pay attention to right-wing politics at all, it's kind of stuff you've heard before. It's like weird gender and race science, like biological absolutism. That's pretty much the core underpinning of her argument, is that men and women are the way they are biologically, and that's why feminism is bad. It's working against nature. That's the underpinning of her entire argument here. She argues a couple different versions of that. But, you know, for the most part, she just kind of gets dunked on by these different feminists over and over again, consistently. And so that's why, even though this show does have its clear biases, it is also nice to watch Jordan Peterson or Candace Owens just get like repetitively dunked on. As for whether or not this is doing some kind of positive service for our society, probably not. because people who agree with Candace Owens are just going to feel like she came away the winner of this debate. Maybe if they're honest with themselves, they can see that she looked bad in certain moments. But again, the deck is inherently stacked against her as well. So you can kind of write it off to that. So I don't know if there's any greater purpose to this, but I have to admit it's an entertaining show. And I apologize for the pitched up audio here, but Jubilee can be rough with the copyright strikes. So we'll see. I apologize for this being more annoying than it needs to be. But let's play a couple clips here, and then I'll get into some other stuff. I won't spend too much time on this. There's some other things I want to talk about.
Would you not agree that that women can both have a career and have children? I mean, you are actively doing that right now.
And I want to be very clear, because I am actively doing it right now. I would be someone that you would call an exception because I get to work from home. I get to wake up in the morning. I don't have a boss, right? I don't have to go into the office from 9 to 5. I get to then therefore spend the entire morning with my children.
So you're an exception, and the 47% of women that make up our labor force are also an exception?
No, the exact opposite. So I'm trying to make it more realistic.
But my issue with this is that not only is it claiming that women can't both be mothers and have jobs, which we know to be true because millions of women do that. My mother does that. You are actively doing it right now. But it also is qualifying what every single woman in this country wants without any clear evidence. I mean, there's 169 million women in this country. How can you say that you know exactly what every woman secretly wants? Are you asking them?
That wasn't my claim that I secretly know what every single woman wants. I'm saying that if you measure up at the end of your life, what brought you more fulfillment, your career or a children, raising children in your family, we will discover that, and there actually have been studies, people that have gone to people on their deathbeds, and the number one regret that people had was that they gave too much to their careers. And this includes men, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, of course, human relation is going to be valued over money and profit.
So then
but
you
at
don't
the same time,
with,
what
you
does
don't
that even...
with my argument
I do
at all. You were agreeing with my argument.
Humans prefer humans over a job, but that's not just singular to women. That's everyone.
And you keep bringing up the 1950s, which,
because it was right before the fact.
I just don't know if that's the period of time that you want to go back to.
No, I'm just going back to the first wave of feminism.
But you want to undo progress that's been done. So I'm curious as to what decade you'd be comfortable living in, especially as a Black woman.
Okay, so we're gonna park aside the race politics because I want to focus on.
Okay, then as a woman, what period of time do you want to go back to?
Just as a woman, I think that it was probably a better environment for women when we understood that raising our children was fulfilling.
But some women still do understand that.
Right.
And a lot of women
and I'm one of them.
And I'm here advocating for you.
Okay. Now, one thing you do find is women, they don't want to stay at home when you pull them. They just want flexible working hours and flexible working conditions like you have. And I think we should all advocate for that. It's not one or the other. But when you sit here and you go, you'll be more fulfilled doing this, then spend all your time doing that. We would love for you to leave the public eye and go focus on what makes you fulfilled.
Okay.
You say we live in a matriarchy.
Right.
Can you give me the definition of patriarchy?
Yes. Well, the patriarchy is the idea that the system, our system in America, is being run by men, and that women are having to exist under a system that immediately disadvantages them because men are behind it. And I disagree with that pointedly. I think actually we're living in a society where people are being very much influenced socially and politically by women.
Okay, so the denotative definition of patriarchy is father rule, and where positions of government are held majorly by men, where women are largely excluded. So 125 House of Representatives are female, and that's only about 25%.
Right.
And only about 28% make up Senate, and 3.3% of Congress up until this date have ever been women. So by denotative definition, we literally live in a patriarchy.
Yes, so I disagree with that. So I think what this gets to, which is actually an important part of the conversation, is that people always think that where there is disparity, there's somehow inequality, and I actually reject that entirely. I think it's just a difference in what we're interested in. I think we're biologically wired, we're interested in different careers, and just because if we looked in the fashion industry and said, oh, well, it's being dominated by women, it wouldn't mean that, okay, well, that means that the fashion industry is a matriarchy and men have no sense. It just means have no ability to communicate how they feel in the fashion industry. I literally think that those numbers show that we're just biologically different.
So the two arguments she's arguing for here is that no career will give women as much joy as raising children, and that in her opinion, we live under a matriarchy, not a patriarchy. And that's how this show works, is that the person in the middle sets the terms of the debate, makes their claims, and then everybody on the outside of the circle, one by one, argues against that claim. And so over and over again, she's kind of just getting walked through the basics of what feminism actually is. And like many of the conservative kind of grifters in her realm, she's kind of lost in this fog, this more culture war fog about like what these things mean. And in a lot of cases, it's very vague what exactly she's talking about. She's very weaselly in terms of what claims she says she's making, because she's going out here arguing against feminism by saying no career will give a woman as much fulfillment as raising children. But then she'll also say, well, I'm just saying, I'm not saying you can't have a career and raise children. I'm just saying that one isn't going to fulfill you as much as the other. That's all I'm saying. So not willing to take her own argument to its logical conclusion for the sake of being just a little bit more slippery, and not having to fully commit to the argument, which is made all the worse because like Candace Owens doesn't need to be afraid of that. She already has embraced the off-putting nature of the perspectives that she espouses, and so there's no need for her to be so weaselly. But clearly to me that shows that she's still uncomfortable in these positions, despite the fact that she's been arguing for this stuff for like, I don't know, the last 10 years or whatever. So the main thing that sticks out like a sore thumb about her argument and how hypocritical it is, which does get pointed out many times through the course of this, is that she's implying that a woman can't have a career and raise children successfully. But that's exactly what she's doing. She brags about how much she loves being a mother, and she is quite successful in her career. And it does get pointed out to her repetitively in this debate that she is the opposite of what she seems to be advocating for, which her response to that is that she's the exception. So this is kind of the conservative mindset to a T, which is, you know, she's allowed to be the exception. And she doesn't have to factor in what she is advocating for, how that would affect her own path in life, because it's less about that and it's more about what happens from here. So it's not about the logic of what allowed her to get to the point that she's at in terms of success, and not just success in her career, but being able to successfully have a family. That's tied to your success in your career. That's the conditions of our society, is that if you have more success individually, then you'll be able to raise your family better. If you don't have success on a career level, it might be very hard for you to raise your family. So that is another way that Candace Owens is an exception. But rather than looking at that disparity and saying, well, I want to advocate for the conditions that would make it the easiest for the most people to achieve the balance in life that I have achieved, instead of that, she says we need to tighten the conditions of society, and we need to tighten the restrictions in society to make it so that less people will feel like they deserve what I have, or feel like they should pursue what I have. Because there's really no other final conclusion to this idea that we should go back to a society where women are less in the workforce. And yes, conservatives they're kind of very excited by this idea right now that women are becoming interested in leaving the workforce in favor of going back to the home and embracing this idea of traditionalism. What drives me crazy about this conservative argument, and I wish this got pointed out to her more specifically here, is that that is already how society was. We had that, we tried that. And the reason we're at the point that we're at now is because that form of society crumbled and gave way to what exists now, in large part because of the struggle of people who lived under those conditions of society who weren't happy with it. And they wanted more freedom for themselves. They wanted to liberate themselves. Women who weren't able to have credit cards at a certain point, or children living under certain authoritarian family structures, or people who don't conform to gender norms, who were forced to grow up in nuclear households that did not allow for that type of nonconformity. You know, those people, the fact that they already existed is what caused those structures of society to fall apart. And this conservative argument that nuclear family is a construction that is natural, that reflects nature, and to depart from that is unnatural, is not backed up by the facts. And, you know, there are many conceptions of how to organize a family, how to organize a society. And yes, there is a pattern to the idea of a man and a woman raising a family together. And I think by and large, that's, a fair way for society to organize itself. But the idea that commentators like Candace Owens need to come out and instruct people and remind people, hey, you just have to conform to your nature rather than pursuing what you want, is the opposite of freedom that conservatives claim to want. Conservatives want people to come to the conclusion themselves that they want less freedom, especially in the case of women, also in the case of minorities. And for some reason, somehow they're making progress on that argument. They are getting more people to come to the conclusion that it's okay for them to have less freedom if it means that society will seem more stable or that their life will seem more stable. And there's some truth to that. And Zoran Mamdani quoted recently the FDR quote that, finally in desperation, they chose to sacrifice liberty in hope of getting something to eat, in reference to societies that slip from democratic societies to authoritarian societies. And that is, in fact, what we're seeing. The society in front of people is not offering them the stability that in some cases they feel was promised to them by the liberal order. And so now that does not seem to be delivering in the ways that it was promised to by, people like Obama, they are considering more contrarian and more regressive perspectives like that of Candace Owens. But for me personally, this stuff falls apart on basic scrutiny. And the only thing that I want to point out here is that at some point in this debate, they're arguing about happiness, like, whether people are statistically happier if they have a family versus if they don't, or if they have a successful career. And Candace is making the argument that studies show that people are happier if they have a family, whereas the person opposite her is arguing that people are more happy if, they have sort of what they want in life, things that they want to pursue, and that could include a family, but doesn't necessarily. And so there's a fact check that pops up that says there's conflicting research on this topic, and that Pew Research finds that higher percentages of adults want a career or close friends to be fulfilled. And the Institute of Family Studies finds that married men and women are happier than unmarried counterparts. So what this fact check is saying is that there's confirmed research that adults want a career or close friends to be fulfilled more so than family. That's more often what they say. And then a right-wing bullshit think tank also argues that married men and women are happier. And it presents this as this is conflicting research. This is not conflicting research. The first thing is straightforwardly true, and then a propaganda outfit called the Institute of Family Studies created their own information that says what they want it to say, which is that married men and women are happier. And if you look into this, even just cursorily, you find it's very straightforwardly an evangelical Christian family oriented think tank. They are advocating for that. And so the fact that that's showing up in this fact check definitely shows the bias here. And not all the fact checks were, had this type of trickery in it, but the fact that they slipped it in there at this crucial moment to help Candace make her point, even though there's nothing about the Institute of Family Studies that is worth crediting. And they didn't even spell it correctly. It's Institute for Family Studies, and they didn't capitalize the name properly. So I don't know who they have setting up this fact check stuff, but that's the kind of stuff that you want to get right if you're calling yourself a fact checker. This is supposed to be a fact checking app, a fact checking company, and it's clearly just biasing right-wing bullshit information and not even doing it properly. So that's what you're getting from Jubilee. Anyway, moving on from that, there is some interesting activity going on in LA involving ICE and the feds. As I have noted, now that the One Big Beautiful Bill has passed, that is going to provide a lot of funding for ICE, more funding for ICE than most militaries in the world. And so the limits that they were coming up against in their raids and their abilities to fight back against and track and punish protesters, they're going to be taking the lid off a lot of those limits. And we are definitely going to see the power of the federal government unleashed through ICE in the coming days. And what they did in MacArthur Park, which is a park in downtown Los Angeles, they essentially staged this show of force where they had a bunch of uniformed soldiers and Homeland Security that did this march through the park, despite the fact that from all reports that I can find, nobody was actually arrested or detained during this march. So nobody was there, first of all, and they didn't end up making any arrests. So they did this entirely as a show of force, and some people speculate that this was some kind of internal photo op, that they're going to use this for their own propagandizing purposes. Pretty dark stuff, pretty fascistic stuff. That's where we're at. The mayor is positioning herself as being against this and, on the phone trying to get them out of the city. And that's her job at the moment. Some people are speculating that that is just because she wants to, run for a higher office. There has been a lot of cooperation between LAPD and ICE, and I suppose that could be them at a certain level, underneath the mayor deciding to do that on their own, but probably not. Probably through some means, Mayor Karen Bass is giving the police the resources to help ICE, or the directives to help ICE, at least in some capacities. And then on the frontward end, she is posturing as though she wants ICE out. So LA is going to be the staging ground for the types of takeovers that they want to do in cities across America. And yes, California and Los Angeles politicians are going to be thrust into the forefront of that. So we will see. They're probably going to be posturing for some version of leadership for themselves. But if they can pose any type of meaningful resistance in the meantime, then that's great. Only other thing to mention would be that the FBI and DOJ have come out and said that there's no Epstein files, there's no client list, there's nothing else that they have to tell us. So they're trying to close that case. And this is actually genuinely pissing off the MAGA base. Do I think that's necessarily going to go anywhere? No. But I will say that this and the Iran stuff seems to have made a dent, at least for the moment. And I think that really what tends to happen is the news cycle washes over people, and their general tendency to be favorable towards Trump takes precedent over whatever objections they might have. So that's probably what we're going to continue to see. However, there's a lot of people who are really invested in the idea of these Epstein files, and they are not necessarily taking it easy on Trump for that. They're not taking it easy on Kash Patel for being the one who has to now come out and say, we don't have anything interesting to give you. You already know everything that we have to say. Pam Bondi originally said she had tens of thousands of tapes involving Jeffrey Epstein. Now they're saying they have nothing. The FBI and DOJ is claiming that he wasn't blackmailing anybody. They have no evidence that he was blackmailing anyone, or that he was killed in his cell, that anybody went in his cell. I think it's entirely possible that he killed himself, although there does mysteriously seem to be a minute worth of security footage missing from what they released. But even if he did kill himself, obviously he was wrapped up in the deepest of scandals, and the idea that his death had nothing to do with that is a non-starter. So we'll see how much that manifests as. They obviously want to get this out of the way fast, and put a lid on it and move on to targeting Trump's opponents. But I think that shows a weakness, and I think the more we can chip away at the credibility of this new version of the FBI and the state that Donald Trump has created with people like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, this is a very potent cudgel that we can use to discredit those operations to the very people that they are trying to propagandize to. So I'd say that's the only way that we can move forward with that information, because obviously they were going to squash this. They were never going to do anything else. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of stuff there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel, book reviews, movie reviews. I'm reading Catcher in the Rye right now. I'm probably going to review that on there. Also posting music early. I've got a couple EPs out that were available first for members only. Right now, there's a couple tracks on there. There's a freestyle by me and my buddies Wrecked and Psych. So if you want access to all that, different podcasts and other stuff, become a member. And if there's other kinds of content that you'd like to see for members only stuff, then let me know and we'll work some things out.